Welcome to the Anchored Podcast. Have you ever wondered how to stay grounded in your faith amid heartache, confusion, and a seemingly mass exodus of people leaving the faith? My name is Roseanne Dawes.
And I'm Stephanie Frankham. And we've discovered that being anchored in Jesus Christ is the key to navigating these rough waters. Join us as we explore how their faith and covenants have helped each of our guests navigate the storms of life. Welcome back to the Anchored Podcast.
Today we have an awesome guest, and his name is Kirk Corbridge.
And Kirk is a Maladian. He's from Malad, Idaho. We have been dear friends, he and his wife and my husband and I, 25 years probably at this point. And he was the ward mission leader at a really amazingly, I don't even know, pivotal time in our lives as he taught us beautiful principles and we saw miracles that took place. And we have just the absolute utmost respect for Kirk. So we're so excited to bring him on the podcast today and share a little bit of his story. Kirk, if you don't mind, will you just tell us a little bit about yourself and share who you are with our guests?
Sure. Thank you. So, as Stephanie mentioned, from Malad, and a little part of the equation that generally doesn't get told is it took me till I was 40 before I got married. And so that was the blessing of my life, because that really started the journey, is after we got married. And so when we got married, she had 3 kids from another marriage, and we had 3 kids later between us, and we actually got the chance to be able to adopt them and to get them all sealed, and so that was a huge blessing. So that's why I would say that that's where the journey began, really, was from that point on. And so we've been in ranching all of our life, and we've had some ups and downs and some real struggles in ranching. We've lost the ranch through financial issues with banks, and so what had been built up by previous generations ended up slowly being piecemealed off to satisfy banks. So that was a real struggle. And then as we continued on in the journey, each child has had their own particular path that they've walked, and so we've got the chance to walk it with them.
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. We're excited. You've already given us a taste of where we're going, so we're excited to hear about this journey. So we're going to turn the time over to you to fill us in on this amazing journey.
Okay, so one of the first miracles that happened was, as I mentioned, is we had the chance to have those kids sealed. Now, their dad, he was very anti-Mormon, and as you can imagine, he would not sign the papers to allow for that to happen, for them to be sealed to us. And we came across another man at the same time that Stephanie knows dearly also. He's been an anchor in both of our lives. Gave us some instructions on what to do, and so we proceeded with that instruction. And wasn't too long after that he finally said, "Yep, I'll allow you to do that." And so we had now the written permission to seal the kids to us. But the oldest girl, she was still quite loyal to her biological father, and so she wasn't quite as thrilled as the other 2 were. and so miraculously we kept doing the instructions that was given to us by this man, which was to go to the temple and put names on prayer rolls. And a year to the date from the first time the first 2 kids were sealed, she wanted to get sealed, and so a year to the date we had her sealed to us. So that was quite a miraculous thing. I think the thing that might be pertinent here is we've had a lot of unsettling things through our life. Losing the ranch was a big one for me. And then as the kids progressed, each one took a different journey. And so I'll begin with the first one, which is JC. He signed up to be in the military, but he said, but I'm going to go on a mission. And so, you can't take me until I get done with that. Well, he went to Spain, and when we went in there, we made sure we had everything documented where they couldn't come back and pull him off his mission. And they tried to do that. And so we had that information down that said, no, you can't do that. And that backed him off. But as soon as he got back from his mission, within 2 months, he was called back up to go into military service, which was to Afghanistan. And you know what that was. That was a brutally tough time for a lot of people. And so as he went in there, he was on road deployment for bombs. And as they were going down one particular road one day, the vehicle that was in front of him blew up. And it killed one of his friends and hurt one of his other friends quite a bit. And that really bothered him because the guy that got killed had family. And so when they went out on their next deployment, he volunteered to be in the lead vehicle, which is the most dangerous vehicle, obviously, because he couldn't stand that the idea that somebody else's wife and child would get that information that their dad had just been killed. And he was single, and so he said, I'll volunteer for it. So he did, and sure enough, they hit a bomb. And so we got the call in the middle of the night from Germany, from the Germany hospital, what had happened. That's where they life flighted him to. And then when they told us that he was headed to Sam Houston down in Texas. So we went down and met him there in Sam Houston, and he was a mess. His one leg was messed up pretty bad, and there was a lot of surgeries that were going on. And to see all of these young men that had lost limbs in one way or another, and it was quite sad because their lives had changed forever also. And some of them are trying to put happiest face on it as they could. And JC had several friends in his unit that were there. And so anyway, so he came home, and then we spent the rest of the next, I don't know how many years, trying to get him through that situation. Ended up taking a leg off, and trying to then nurse him back into full health. And he was again single. And so that was one of the first big challenges with the kids. And we since then we've had a couple of other kids that have left the church, and that's been interesting and hard at the same time. Coming from a ranch and coming from the cowboy way, it's my way or the highway. And that's not a good combination to raise kids in. For some it's just great, but as they got older and they started to find their wings and where they wanted to go and what they wanted to do, it was a really good process for us as parents, because we had to learn to take it as it came and love them as where they were at, wherever that was. And we actually now to this day, the thing I'm most glad about is the relationships are preserved everybody knows they come at it completely different. And I have had one child that we've had some pretty intense conversations, but at the end of the day, we get up and we hug each other, and we know that in spite of coming at it completely differently, we love each other dearly, and we can feel that. He can feel that from me, and I can feel that from him. Very genuine people. And
Kirk?
so, yep.
I'm just curious. That's a lot of learning along the way, you know, where you have kind of, this is just the way I'm used to doing it, this, but then you realize I can't do this. So obviously there was some navigation of figuring out what is the right way to do that. Can you tell me kind of the spiritual journey along the way to learn how to love and meet them where they are so that you can still keep those relationships intact?
Yeah, sure. The obvious thing would be it's what the fruit was producing. Trying to do it the way I would have done it in the beginning had negative fruit. And I realized that the relationship was more important than, well, this is the way we're doing it in this household, kind of a thing. And so recognize, it's crazy because when you're on a ranch and you're training horses, it's a very similar process. Each horse is different, and you're starting from scratch, and you have to kind of figure out where that horse is at and then build on wherever that is. And it's the same way with God's children. Just because they don't inherently approach it the same way that I do, you have to take them wherever they're at and then build on that relationship. So that's what we did. And so as they further went down their road, our relationships got better because we weren't in contention all the time. And finally, when you can start getting that barrier down, then you can start hearing each other, and keeps the communication open. And so that was the reason why we changed. So as we progressed on, the financial issues were the toughest, because this ranch had been in the family for a long time, and to see that slowly being diminished by force because of the banks. This all happened back in 2008. And if you can remember back then, that was the absolute worst economically. And so banks were running scared, and it was hard to get loans. And so you were basically at their mercy as to what you had to do to get financed. So we walked down that road, and had 3 bad years in a row. And of course, after the 3rd year, then that was kind of the death knell, and we had to sell to get out from underneath the debt that was there. And so I think one of the things that helped get through all of these periods is, at some point, you come to grips with, is there a God or isn't there? And if there is a God, does he hear me? Does he hear my situation? And if he does, what is the path that we've got to walk? And it's easy to ask for deliverance, to have the hard problem fixed or solved, but that isn't really what the journey is about, is to have him alleviate all of our problems. It's what do you want me to do, and where do you want us to go as a family in the direction that would produce the greatest amount of fruit down the road? And since you can't see that, then you just start walking that road. And so not knowing how it was going to end up with these financial bad years ahead of us, when it came down time to sell, that was a blow. because it was so painful and had been in the family for so long. And I think that was probably my low spot. And the thing that keeps you going in that kind of a situation, even though you don't know what the outcome is going to be or what the new direction is, you don't know any of that. All you know is that it's bad and it hurts. And so the thing that anchored me is I knew that God was real. I had enough experience in the past that I could follow along and say, okay, I know you're real. I know you're aware of this, and I don't understand it, and it's not comfortable at all, but we're just kind of trusting you on it. If there was any advice I'd give to somebody that's walking similar paths, I think it would be, in your journey, especially in the beginning parts of it, wherever you're at, I don't care whether it's questions about God or whether it's questions about the church or whether it's questions about the Book of Mormon, whatever those experiences are that you will have had, that when it happens, that you say to yourself in your mind and in your heart, I feel this. I know God's speaking to me right here, right now. And so I'm going to mark it in my heart. And so when you go down the road a little bit further and you don't know where you're at going down the road, you can remember in your mind, even though you might not feel it, but you can remember, oh, I remember I felt it back then because I marked it. And that way you have an anchor to go back to. And if you forget those anchors, there's no way that you can keep your bearings when you're walking down a road that you have no idea where it's going. But if you've marked that in your heart, then when you get into those positions, you can say, well, I don't know what's ahead, but I know what I felt back then, and I'm hanging on to that. And that's what causes you to trust God that you can go forward. If that foundation is taken away from you, then you really are lost. And there was a time that I felt that. It was probably, of all the things that I've experienced, that was the worst time. And this experience, I won't tell you what it was, but that experience is what taught me to start marking things in my heart, because I had got an answer on something, and immediately after the answer, there was a feeling that came over me, and questions and doubt and everything that the adversary would throw at a person. And within a short period of time, I didn't know where up was, where down was. I was just, it felt like you're in a free fall because you don't know where bottom is. And that was horrible because you don't have any bearings.
So what I'm hearing is that you got an answer and then Satan just attacked you and just said,
Yep.
and so you didn't know what that answer was anymore, and you were just confused and just dark, and you just felt like you didn't know anything. Right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yep.
Have you thought
Yep.
about that as far as
Yep.
like what was that? Like, how does that, is it I guess maybe because I don't understand the whole story of what that's tied to, but what was the learning in that? I know you said you needed to mark it, but I guess I just don't understand what the purpose of that whole thing was. Is that just what Satan does?
Yeah. So to give you just a little bit more clarification on it, the answer that you thought you got from God, when that gets immediately challenged by the adversary, if you haven't marked that as no, I'm not going to allow the adversary to cause me to question that because I know what I got. And what I'm saying is, if you don't do that, and you allow the adversary to come in, and then that continues to build on itself, pretty soon you're in free fall.
Hmm.
You know, when they talk about how firm a foundation in the gospel, that's a horrible feeling to feel like you have no foundation. You don't know where God is. You don't know whether it's up or down, or whether you're being deceived, or you don't. I had never felt that kind of an attack before. And so it took me, oh my gosh, it took me probably 9 months of wading through that, just wading through it. I went on a date with a rancher lined me up down in California. So I went down there and met this girl. To give you an indication of how tough that was, when we made our reacquaintances, and all of that, his wife said to him, she said, something's happened to him. She said, I don't know what it is, but something's happened to him. That's how traumatic it was. It affected your whole being.
Was this before you were
Um,
married?
yes,
So this would have been pre-marriage. So you just jumped back. Got it.
yes.
Okay.
So it was all, it was all before me and Laura got married. Yes. So the reason I'm relaying this experience is that if you don't get in the habit of marking these events in your life, that you are now susceptible to the attack of the adversary. And so if you've developed the ability to mark it when it comes along, when the adversary attacks, he can't push you back very far, because you can say, no, I know God still loves me and I still know he's there. Or I've had experiences in the church, or I've had experiences in the temple that I know I can go back to. And so therefore, when you're questioning about those types of things, you don't have to have it shake you completely to where you abandon the whole thing. You've gone back to where, no, I remember that. And I think a lot of people that leave don't do that. And so when they get in these questioning moments and times, because they can't remember those things that should have been marked in their heart, then it's really a tough time for them, because they don't know where to go. They don't know what the answer is. And so for marking ourselves as we go, it helps anchor us.
So Mark, when you're marking yourself, what would you say when you were going through the journey yourself and you recognized now is when I should mark this? Can you describe something so that we can understand as the listeners, how do you know this is a moment that I should record that? I should write that down. I should remember that in my heart and let that become an anchor.
Great question. It's because what it does to your spirit. When those moments or events come in our life where God has touched us, it's uplifted us, it's made us feel enlightened, or we feel his presence or his understanding. In any of those ways, we can say, okay, this is unusual because I know how my spirit is reacting and how I feel. So therefore, this is one of those spots where I'm going to mark it, whatever that particular issue is.
I'm curious. I'm going through something myself, and I'm just wondering, praying for something, right? And we know that we just don't think that God is just a cosmic, here you go, here's all your gifts, right? Answers to all your prayers.
Yeah.
But there's something significant that my husband and I are going through right now, and praying about that, I kind of got an answer that it wasn't going to be the way that it was going to be. And it wasn't uplifting. It was actually kind of sad and depressing, and still working through that even today, as this happened last night.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is it made me sleep. It's calmed me down enough to go to sleep. But still, it didn't feel like a lift. It didn't feel inspiring, and like, that's kind of depressing. So that's what I'm kind of navigating through right now was that the Holy Ghost that told me that's how it was going to turn out? Or because it was such a downer, was that just Satan attacking me and not
Yeah.
letting me have the faith?
I would almost venture to guess that you, knowing who you are and what you are doing, you've had enough experience in your life's journey that you can recognize when God's speaking to you. It might not be something that necessarily lifts you up, but you recognize the voice. And so I would guess in your situation, um, the answer you got, you've learned it from previous other things. Oh, I recognize that voice, therefore, that's what just happened. And so there's something there that can anchor you. Either it's a familiarity of how he has spoken to you in the past, or it does something to your spirit and your heart. Now, you said, it gave you peace. A little bit, it sounded like you could go to sleep.
Right.
That would be an indication that
Even though I didn't
either
like
that
the
you're
answer.
really
Yeah. And I won't know till Friday, but at the same time, I'm just like, I'm still kind of hanging on because I really want to see was that really my answer? But that's hard to just
yeah,
wait,
yeah,
test the Lord.
yeah. And so I think that's a really important part in the journey for anybody. Um, I've had some really good friends that's left the church, and I feel like, they're really good people, and they probably have discovered some flaws in in how they view the church or how the church is in their minds, and in the process of doing that, if you haven't marked these events that you've had in your life previously, let's say like in the temple or about the Book of Mormon, uh, it's easy to let things that you have discovered, and they might be true. They might be just as true as true. And so it rattles you and it shakes you. And so instead of trying to navigate through and say, well, wait a minute, I just discovered something and I know that's true, but it doesn't match up with my experience in the church or whatever. So what do I do? And so then you would say, well, okay, let's go back to the last time that you felt an experience either with God or in church or about the church or the temple or whatever it is, and say, well, I can't throw it all out because I saw this red flag here. I can't do that. How do I navigate this? Because I know back here I've marked it in my heart. And so that's the anchor that gives them the ability to move forward, not really understanding why or what it means or the implications that they've learned, um, because um, it's rattling to them. It's disturbing. It's causes concern. And so I as I've talked and I've listened to other people tell their stories, it's pretty much the same thing. It's like, well, wait a minute. If this isn't right, then this isn't right, and then pretty soon they're out of the church. Because it's pretty hard. I look at it this way: if there's been positive fruit in the past, and then we come up with something that challenges our previously held notions, let's say, then you'd say, well, what do I do with that? And the scriptures and the temple say, waiting for further light and knowledge. And so you patiently ask for something that will give you the further light knowledge on how to square this all up. And that way that gets you to the next step. But if you just discover something and then throw everything else, then you might be throwing out the very blessings that are going to be the very anchor to you. And I think that's kind of the part of this podcast, is that's what we have to be very careful of. So you have the people, we have a culture in the church, and the church is, you believe this, and you do it this way, and you do it this way, and you do it this way. And the culture kind of almost invites not asking tough questions, hard questions. And so the people that are in the church and stay and are active, they're limited because they fail to ask hard questions, tough questions. But those that have left, they have forgotten and have not anchored themselves into where they throw the baby in the bathwater out when they discover certain things, and therefore they are they're throwing out the very things that are going to be a tremendous blessing in their life. So you have to balance honesty with yourself to ask hard questions and not be afraid of them, even if it challenges some notions that you have. But also you have to have gone far enough in the journey that you can say, no, I know the Book of Mormon is true. It's an anchor. I can't leave and throw that out because I know what's there. I can't do that. Or if it's in the temple, I can't throw the temple out because I've had these experiences. And so it's a balancing act of being honest to yourself and being honest with God and pressing forward and allow God to show you how to navigate it. Let me just back up just a second. Stephanie will appreciate this. There was a man that we both knew that had been a mission president. He'd been a member, what they call a special representative to the 12 back when he did it. So he was very well thought of in what he did. He was an amazing man by anybody's benchmark. Well, he was on a mission with his wife, and Elder Faust, he said to him in the middle of a missionary meeting, he stopped and he said, "Now I'm going to say something to brother so-and-so that only he will understand." And he said, "Christ is the only one that does the choosing." And then he went on. And so how I have navigated some of these tough questions, these people that are asking these tough questions in the church, how I've navigated it is this way. And this is what God has helped me see. With that understanding, if Christ is the one, if he's the only one that does the choosing of who he bestows his blessings on, then the only other thing that we have to ask is, well, then what do the ordinances have to offer? And so we have ordinances that he's also restored, and those ordinances have specific blessings attached to them. And so now, if I've got a firm foundation that I know the Book of Mormon's true, I know that. And so the priesthood got restored. In fact, that's one of the things I think we overlook is the Book of Mormon came before the ordinances did. And so it's vitally important that whatever there is in that Book of Mormon, it's vitally important that I stick with that no matter what. And so the next question is then, on the ordinances that came afterwards, what do the ordinances offer? And so as we come into this conundrum of people that are struggling with really tough, good, honest questions, how I have been led through it is this: if Christ is the only one that does the choosing, and I have access to the ordinances and the blessings that are attached to those ordinances, then everything else doesn't matter. All the frailties of man, all the questions that we have, if Christ is in control and he can choose me, not any man, it's not the prophet, it's not anybody else, It's Christ is choosing who to bestow those blessings on, and I have access to those blessings through the ordinances. What else matters? If I don't understand anything else, I'm going to just keep plugging on until I get further light and knowledge, which God promised to send me. And so if you take all the frailties and the problems that we see, it throws all of that out the window. It doesn't make any difference how good or how bad the church is run. That's not up to us. It's not our stewardship. All that we need to know is that Christ is the one that is doing the choosing, nobody else. And therefore, if I go into the temple and I'm trying to find out what blessings are attached to what ordinances, then I'm free to go as far as I want and seek those blessings.
You were talking about how if we are anchored, if we mark it and we remember these times that the Lord has taught to us and he has answered our questions and he's changed our hearts, all of that. And then there are those that maybe they didn't mark it, maybe the questions became too much and their path led them away from the church. So let's say that happened.
Okay.
And Christ is doing the choosing, right? So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. How do you support those that I don't even know that I would say, I don't know. I feel like I'm watching my loved ones and in my family and outside of my family that have left the church. And it's been in good faith with them trying to remember and them seeking and waiting for that extra revelation to come. And the revelation for them wasn't to stay in the church at that point. So how do you support somebody who's on their own journey, who doesn't feel drawn to stay, but we know that the Lord is in relentless pursuit of them. I'm just curious, with your friends and with your family members that have left, how have you chosen to support them when they felt their foundation crack?
Right. That's a great question, because I think I look at it this way. We're all on a journey, and if their journey is trying to send them down a different path than mine, what I keep coming back to is, you know what, God's in control. He's got this. And so whether that journey is whether the way I would go or the way they go, I know he's got it. And so I trust that. I trust that he'll do whatever he needs to do to give them whatever experiences they need to have, that he can finally give an opening where they can say, oh, I get it now. And so I think on our part, it's just trusting that God is the one that has to manufacture those events in their life to where they can have the connections that he wants them to have. And he's more patient than we are, so he allows them to walk down that journey. And so he just keeps going with them. That's one of the things I think I wanted to really leave is with this podcast is God will meet you wherever you're at, wherever you're at, and whenever it's right. Let me give you an example. This will be a very extreme example. We had a guy that came and stayed with us on a guest ranch. He was a Jew. And when he came, he could feel the spirit in our house. And it was something that he'd never felt before. And that was life-changing to him. It re-anchored him to God. And so, and let me say re-anchored him. There was an earlier event in his life where his dad came to him and said, Boris, I said, I don't want you to tell your mom that I've got cancer, but I wanted you to know. Well, the mother came to him 2 days later and said, Boris, I want you to know I've got cancer, but I don't want you to tell Dad. And so, and he being, this is the quality that I do see among a lot of people. God can work easier with people that are very blunt and very honest. They're very genuine. And he was that. So he went to God. He says, God, if there is a God, he said, you heal both of my parents, or I'll blaspheme your name the rest of my life. And within the week, they were both, I won't say it's the week, but when they both went back to the doctor, they were both cleared of cancer. Both of them. And so we look at that and we go, wow, I'd never approach God that way. But he takes you where God takes you where you're at. And he used that experience to be an anchor for Boris. And so he meets you wherever you're at, even if it's clumsy, even if you're mad, even if you're, not in the best, whatever. It's okay. It's okay. He's got it. He's got you. That's very comforting to me, to these kids, people that we know that have left. It's okay. He's got them. They're good people. They're honest people. They're honest in their heart. They're trying to follow their heart. And so one day they'll have experiences where it will help them recognize the truth. And so we just be patient with God and let that journey unfold however it unfolds. So the thing that I think I've realized, and what's helped me kind of walk through this whole thing, is that as we go through these difficult issues and times in our life, and I have great confidence and peace that God's in control. So no matter the people that are asking all these questions and discovering all this stuff, the question that I have to ask is, God still a part of this church or isn't he? That's the question. And so I go back to the Book of Mormon and I say, okay, he restored the Book of Mormon, and we know if anybody that's put any effort in, they know that that's a book that came from God. So the question is about his church. Did the church go off the rails or didn't it? That's the question that they come up with. And so it makes no sense to me for God to go to all that blood and sacrifice and effort to get his Book of Mormon restored and the church restored to let it just go off the rails. That makes no sense to me. And so if that's the case, if God still is involved in guiding this church, and there's been some things in our past that previous prophets have had to come and correct and say, no, we don't believe that. And so that would tell me God's still in control and he's still trying to correct it. So we've got a church here that might have some perceived flaws. And so if that's the case, then what do you do with that information? And so I would say, I'm going to take whatever God did. So when Joseph Smith died, did God abandon the church? And the answer is no, he didn't. Even though he might have had reason to, but he didn't. And so at one point, the church is going to be cleansed. At some point, I'm going to be cleansed. He didn't abandon the church, and he won't abandon me. And that gives me a lot of hope. And so we just plow forward, trusting God.
I love it. I love it. So after losing the farm, after having family members that have left the church, after having your own 9-month struggle and really wondering and wrestling with God's existence, and is he really speaking to me? Why now, with all of that hindsight, why do you choose to stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
Because of what I've anchored into my life. When I went through a time after we lost the farm, and it was probably the lowest point of my life. I remember calling this friend that you and I know. And I said to him, I said, I feel like I'm a waste. I'm a failure. I've failed in business. I failed in ranching. I failed in my marriage. I failed in my kids. It was hard. I was at the very lowest point I'd ever had. And right after that, things started to coming into my mind as I was working for the church then, and I was traveling all over the United States. And I had these thoughts start coming into my mind, and I started to try to get them written down. Finally, I had to just get a recorder as I was driving and get it down on tape. And then when I'd come into the hotel at night, I'd try to put what seemed like random thoughts together and try to make sense of it. Out of that experience, some of the greatest revelations I've had in my life came out of that. I wouldn't trade that hard experience for anything. You could give me, I've said this before when I was teaching the high priest, I said, you could give me the 10 biggest, best ranches in the United States and $1 billion to run them all, because that's what it would take. I would not trade that experience for what God taught me. And what he taught me was in the Book of Mormon. It was in the Book of Mormon. And when I saw it, it's like, oh my heavens. I can't believe what you just showed me, God. It was hiding in plain sight. And once I discovered it, it was all through the Book of Mormon. And so with that, it opened up doors and a new level that I'd never seen before. It's not talked about. It's not taught. But God taught me, and I'm grateful that I had those really tough experiences.
What amazing personal experience that you've had with God in learning how he speaks to you and you learning how to pinpoint, oh, that's what I need to imprint on my heart and anchor you in that, because, and it's those personal experiences. And it's so individual. Like you were taught something that's not talked about, but yet you had that relationship with the Lord to continue even through the 9 months, figuring it all out. You continued to learn and be open to hearing him. But I also love the fact that you anchored it in basic truths. Like, is the Book of Mormon true? Is God still there? I mean, those are like important foundational things to anchor ourselves in, because a lot of times the other questions, at least in my life, what I've noticed is I just have to, when I have my questions that kind of raise some concern for me, I can always anchor it back to, but do I believe it? And the answer is yes, I do believe it. I might not know why I believe it, but I feel like I believe it. And so I can just be patient with that. And it's those feelings like you're talking about, it just anchoring in our heart, those feelings and tender sweetness of the spirit that just kind of whispers to me to say, oh yeah, that's what it feels like. So thank you so much for sharing that with us and with our audience. And it's just valuable. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Kirk, and to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode with Kirk Corbridge. We're so grateful for his insight. And we would ask you that if you have a story, that you reach out to us on anchoredinChristpodcast@gmail.com, or you can find us on our website at anchoredpodcast.net. Reach out to us. We'd love to hear your story. And please like and subscribe on whichever platform you are listening, so that we can get this reach to be expanded and for us to be able to testify of our Savior every single Sunday. Thank you so much. We will see you next Sunday.